Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we've got another Planet Zoo mod spotlight. This is part 214, so we're really making up there in some big numbers for Planet Zoo, of course. We will take a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got a lot of otters. You could say it is a utterly amazing episode coming up because we've got 5 different species of otters done by the World of Otters pack done by Sky Polaris. But we've also got a couple other mods. We typically have 7 in a showcase these days, not 5. So there's a couple other mods I'm really excited to show you. But yeah, we're gonna get stuck into this one. So we're gonna start off with a J-Quatics mod. Before we get into the otters, we've got here a nice little fish. This is the flagtail Pliochidaris, I believe you say that. Pliochidaris. So this is a Serpoplochidaris incinus, or the kissing Podocharis or flag-tailed Pliochidaris. These guys are a species of freshwater rayfin fish from the family Poikilodontid, also known as the Brocamichos or the flannel-mouth Calariformes, or sometimes known, you probably know their relatives as kind of, like freshwater sharks kind of things, or these guys. Or it's something similar to that, in that kind of group. These guys are technically native to the western and central parts of the Amazon basin, and they are also a migratory species. So they move in large groups, so they like to, live in schools. And they move in large groups into whitewater rivers to spawn, and afterwards returning to blackwater or clear water rivers as well as the flooded forests. So they tend to spawn up in the white waters and then come back down to the black waters and clear things. And they're also quite important for fisheries. They're actually sometimes found in the aquarium trade, but they are a larger fish, so they do require a large tank. They have a maximum standard length of about 27.5 centimeters, or about 10 inches long, and the weight of about 560 grams. And they resemble most other members of their genus, where most species are kind of silvery with an orange-red fins and a striped tail. These guys actually lack the dark flank spots that can be seen in the adults Tanuras, which is another species. But both species have that as a juvenile, so you can't use it to define them or to tell them apart when they're juveniles, but when they're adults, you can. So another cool species. Let's see what other information we can find in the Zoopedia. They breed annually, go through a tremendous migration upstream. Some of the salmon, they're omnivorous. They feed on Progebium winter. The Dutch reflect that in Aquaria. Okay, let's see what else we can find. The kissing Proteus to the unique shape of its lips. There are 2 species. The other one is we mentioned that before. Peaceful towards most other fish species and harmless towards their keepers, but they can swallow other this kind of kept in groups that are too small, so need to be big groups. Forage for vegetables, then you keep well oxygenated water. Okay, sounds about right. Really cool one by J-Quatics. So next up, we have got one of the 5 otters from the utterly amazing World of Otters mod. Sorry, I'm going to use the otter pun quite a bit in this video. But we've got a really cool species here. We've got the African clawless otter, or the Congo clawless, or the Cape clawless otter, or the Groot otter is kind of an interesting name. So this is actually the second largest species of otter, or a river otter, second only to the giant otters of South America, which we've already got in the game. So they are the second largest freshwater otter species. They inhabit permanent water bodies in the savanna and lowland forests across most of sub-Saharan Africa. And they are characterized by their partially webbed and clawless feet, where the name is derived, with Aonix basically means without claw or without hoof. So that's kind of Aonix, which is a genus name. So these guys are a member of the weasel family. They're a mustelid, much like other species of weasels and otters. So I'm not going to go say, oh, these are all mustelids, because, they're all the same kind of family, because we've got 5 different otters. I'm going to summarize those bits as well. And there was originally 6 different subspecies described, and until recently the Congo clawless otter, which I'm pretty sure we will be covering. No, we won't be covering. Was considered a subspecies, but now they consider their own species the Congo clawless otter. So these guys have a chestnut-coloured, thick, smooth fur with almost silky underbellies, and they're characterized by these white facial markings, as you can see there, and that extend downwards toward the throat and chest. Paws are partially webbed with 5 fingers, but without opposable thumbs, and all claws except for digits 2, 3, and 4 on the high feet lack claws. And they have a large skull that is broad and flat, as you can kind of see there. And they have a relatively small orbit and short snout, with molars being large and flat, used for crushing prey. In terms of sizes, male otters are typically slightly larger than the females, so on average. So adults are typically about 113 to 168 centimeters, or about 44 to 64 inches in length, and including their tails, which is about a third of that length, and they weigh between 10 to 36 kilograms, with most otters being ranging between 12 to 21 kilograms. So on average, it's 10 to 36 kilograms. Between 22 to 79 pounds, but on average between 12 and 21 kilograms. Or about 12 to 46 pounds. And they actually consider the third largest otter after the sea otter and the giant otter. So the sea otter is heavier than the giant otter, but is not as long, but they're heavier. And actually the third largest extant mustelid, or the third largest living species of weasel, as it weighs slightly more than the wolverine, the honey badger, and the European badger, which are the runner-ups. And despite actually being a close relative of the Asian small-clawed otter, I believe they're not in the same genus anymore, I think, but they are kind of considered related to each other. Yeah, they are related. They're in the same genus. But despite being related to them, they are often twice the size. So in terms of their habitat, the African clawless otter can be found pretty much anywhere from open coastal plains to semi-arid regions to densely forested areas, and it's found mostly in southern Africa. They live in areas surrounding permanent bodies of water, usually surrounded by some sort of foliage, and they use logs, branches, and loose foliage generally greatly appeal to the otters as they provide shelter, shade, and great opportunities to roll around. They are slow and rather clumsy on land, but they do build burrows in the banks near the water, allowing them for easier food access and also quick escape from predators. And in the False Bay area of the Cape Peninsula in South Africa, they've actually been observed scavenging among the beaches and rocks and hunting in the shallow surf for mullet. And they're nocturnal in urban areas and lie up during the day in quiet bushy areas. In terms of their behavior and ecology, they are mostly solitary, but they will live in neighboring territories of family groups of up to about 5 individuals, with each still having their own range within the territory, and most often keep to themselves unless seeking a mate. Territories are marked by a pair of anal glands, which create a particular scent, with each otter being quite territorial over its range. But how it spends its day, they typically will spend its day swimming and catching food. They return to their burrows or halts for safety, cooling, or rub down using grass and leaves. That's what they kind of use it for cooling. Mainly aquatic creatures, though. They use their tails for locomotion to propel them to the water, and also they're used for balance for walking or sitting upright, which is interesting as well. In terms of reproduction, they give birth to a litter of about 2 to 5 young each about early spring. So we'll have a look at the cute little babies. As you can see, very cute little baby. Mating will take place in short periods through the raining season in December, and afterwards both males and females go their separate ways and return to living solitary once more. Young are raised solely by females, and gestation will last about 2 months, or about 63 days. Weaning takes about 45 to 60 days, with the young reaching maturity at about a year of age. In terms of their diet, though, they include a lot of water-dwelling animals in their diet, including crabs, fish, frogs, and worms. They also will dive after prey to catch it, and then swim to shore again, where they eat. Their forepaws come in handy when searching devices, so they like the Asian small-clawed otter, they will use their hands to go through mud and rocks and things to look for food. And are great tools for digging into the muddy bottom of rivers and ponds, picking up rocks and looking under logs. They also have extremely sensitive whiskers, or vibrissae, which are used as sensors and pick up the movement of potential prey in the water. So that's quite cool. And for the little babies, they just get their mother's milk until they're about 60 days old, as we kind of mentioned. In terms of predation, they are quick in the water and burrowing on land. They do not have many predators, but their greatest threat comes from the python, which often lie in wait and are near the water. But other predators they can face, including crocodiles and African fish eagles. If threatened, they'll emit a high-pitched scream and then warn neighbourly otters of their predator. But in terms of thermoregulation, because they live in Africa, it can get quite hot in Africa. Staying cool means they spend most of their time in the water, or use their burrows to get away of the highest temperatures of the day. But to stay warm, on the other hand, they depend solely on their thick fur, where they have guard heads covering their body, acting as insulation. And since they lack an insulating layer of body fat, the only means of their warmth is from these thick coats of fur, since they don't really have much fat. But in terms of their threats, they are considered near threatened, but most of their threats come from humans. So these guys will often forage in man-made fisheries and may be hunted or entangled in nets. Overfishing by humans reduces the local food supply for these otters. And they're sometimes hunted for their thick, soft pelts, which humans use as a form of clothing. And in forested areas, logging may be a big threat, as erosion leads to greater turbulent rivers, which means can greatly reduce the population of fish, which means less food for otters. This actually may well be a far greater threat to the otters in hunting, and the Otter Trail is a hiking trail in South Africa named after the otter, which is found in the area. And otters along the trail are protected, and it falls within the Tsikamana National Park. So yeah, another really cool species, another one that's utterly amazing. So we're moving on from Africa into Southeast Asia. We've got another species of otter going up there. We've got the hairy-nosed otter, or Lutra sumatrana. So this is one is more closely related to your American otters, I believe. Lutra is related to, let me just check the extant species. The Eurasian otter is their other closest relative. So the hairy-nosed otter, or Lutra sumatrica, these guys are a semi-aquatic mammal, like other otters, native to Southeast Asia. It's actually one of the rarest and least known of the otter species, which is quite sad. So in terms of their description, you can see they've got short brown fur that becomes paler on the belly, and it has a distinctive rhinophorium, which is kind of the skin around the nose, because rhino often means nose, and it's fully covered in kind of short dark hair from the upper edge of its nostrils, and its upper lip and chin are whitish, as you can kind of see there. And some individuals also have a reddish chestnut in colour. They have a long, slender body, and they have fully webbed paws and prominent claws. So that's another way you can tell them from the clawless otters. Head to body length ranges from about 57 to 82 centimetres, or about 22 to 32 inches in length, with the tail length being about 35 to 50 centimetres, or 13 to 20 inches, and they can weigh between 5 to 8 kilograms, or about 11 to 18 pounds. Its skull is rather flattened than that of the smooth-coated otter, for example, and has smaller teeth. Its forepaws are about 5.8 centimetres, or 2.3 inches wide, and they are smaller than the hind paws, which are about 2.6 inches, or about 6.6 centimetres wide. In terms of its distribution and habitat, these guys are found across Southeast Asia, from southern Thailand, Cambodia, southern Vietnam, to Malaysia and Sumatra and Borneo. They are locally extinct in India, Singapore, and Myanmar, and possibly in Brunei. In Thailand, though, they can be found in the Phu Tuar Dang peat swamp and areas of the Bang Na River. So it's likely they do have a bit of a stronghold. Cambodia, they can be reported in lowland forests. In Sumatra, there was actually one killed on a road next to the Masai River. But they seem to be quite not that common there. They sadly, a bit hidden, which is a little bit of a worry. In terms of their biology and ecology, they live in coastal and larger inland, or in the coast or around large inland rivers, either solitary or in groups of up to about 4. Their diet includes fish such as the broadhead catfish, snakeheads, the climbing perch, and water snakes, with more general mollusks and crustaceans. But during the dry season, they actually forage in drainage canals and ponds as well. Pairing of a male and a female may be limited to the breeding season. There is a contact call between these otters with a single syllabic chirp. And adult females call the pups with a chatter, and populations in Cambodia are known to breed between November and March. The gestation period is about 2 months, and the family of both parents and the cubs were sighted in December and February. So we'll have a look at the cute little baby as we discuss that, because, cute little endangered species. So we're going to talk about their endangeredness. So the hairy-nosed otter is actually considered quite endangered, and they're threatened by their loss of habitat, but also poaching. So they are considered the rarest otter in Asia, and they're most likely verging at the end of extinction in the most northern parts of their range, and we don't know much about them elsewhere. Only a few viable populations remain, which are widely scattered in the region, and their main threats is the loss of wetland habitats, especially lowland wetland habitats, that's where they like to live, but also hunting for its fur and meat, and accidental killing during fishing, so they get caught in nets and stuff like that. But in captivity, there has been the Wildlife Alliance-led Wildlife Rapid Response Team. They donated a hairy-nosed otter caught near Tole Sap to the Whamtuma Wildlife Research Centre, where it has been frequently sick throughout its life in captivity and died in 2010. But this was the only one actually known in captivity, so there's not really any breeding programs, sadly. But hopefully just with enough protection of their natural habitat, they should be fine. So yeah, really, really cool otter. One from Southeast Asia, and sadly quite rare. But next 3 otter species, they're all coming from South America. So South America is a bit of a mecca for diversity of otters. So we're going to start off with not the sea otter. Honestly, I think we should swap the names. This should be the sea otter, but this is the marine otter. So it's a very interesting name there. So these guys, or Lotruna felina, these guys are a relatively rare and unknown species of South American mammal from the weasel family, so they're mustelid, like other otters. The scientific name means a feline otter, and their name in Spanish is often gato marino, or the marine cat. And the marine otter, as you could guess, it gets its name because it lives in saltwater and coastal environments and rarely ventures into freshwater estuarine habitats. And the saltwater exclusivity is unlike most other otter species, except for the almost fully aquatic sea otter. Or, the sea otter of the North Pacific. So, funny enough, these guys, even though they're quite interesting, they are the smallest otters, or one of the smallest otters, but also one of the smallest marine mammals as well. So they don't get very big. So they range between 87 to 115 centimeters, or about 34 to 45 inches, from nose to the tip of the tail, and they weigh between 3 to 15 kilograms, or 6 to 11 pounds. Their tail will measure between 30 to 36 centimeters, or 12 to 14 inches, and its fur, as you can see, is quite coarse, with guard hairs measuring up to 2 centimeters in length, and then it covers the insulating underfur. The marine otter, as you can see, often dark brown above and on the sides, and fawn on the kind of throat and underside. The marine otter, like other species of otter, has webbed paws and strong claws, and the ventral side or underside of the paws is partially covered in fur. And they have 36 teeth, and the teeth are developed for slicing rather than crushing, so they've got a slightly different diet compared to a lot of other species of otter. And they do not display sexual dimorphism, so the males and females are pretty similar to each other. So in terms of the habitat, the marine otter is found in littoral areas of southwestern South America, close to the shore in the intertidal zone from northern Peru, pretty much all along the coast of Chile and into the southern reaches of Argentina. And there has been occasional vagrants seen as far as the Falkland Islands, even though they may have potentially lived there in the past, we don't know. The marine otter inhabits rocky shorelines that are abundant in seaweed and kelp, and infrequently visits freshwater rivers and estuaries. They appears to select habitat with surprisingly high exposure to strong swells and winds, which, unlike most other otters, which prefer the calm waters, these guys like it rough, you could say. Cave and crevices in the rocky shorelines may provide them with the cover they need, and often a halt will have no land access at high tide, and they tend to avoid sandy beaches. In terms of their kind of ecology, as I mentioned, rocky intertidal zones with natural crevices is kind of ideal for their dens and feeding areas. But they spend most of their time hidden in caves. Their behavior is actually quite difficult to observe. So they often generally avoid humans. In response to human activity, they will spend less time on the coast and stray from their dens during the day to fissures inaccessible to humans. Though they are generally avoidant of humans, their inhabitants of fishing villages are an indicator of their ability to adapt to urbanization. So in terms of reproduction, we'll have a look at the cute little baby as we talk about reproduction as well. Where are you? No, that's not you. We want to have a look at the baby. There is the baby. Very, very cute. Marine otters are either monogamous or polygamous, and breeding occurs in December or January. Litters, about 2 to 5 pups are typically born, and they're born in January, February, March, after about a gestation of about 60 to 70 days. The pups will remain with their mother for about 10 months of parental care, but sometimes can be seen on their mum's belly as she swims on her back, which is a practice that's actually quite similar to sea otters. And the parents will bring food to their pups and teach them how to hunt. But in terms of feeding, studies have looked into their latitudinal variations of their diet, so kind of where they live in terms of their latitude on the Earth may influence their diet a bit, and also their dive time and feeding periods as well. So the marine otters of southern Chile will primarily feed on fish, while those of northern Chile will feed on crustaceans and mollusks. And the otters of Isla de Vega in Peru actually predominantly prey on a colony of Peruvian diving petrels. And in January 2009, there was actually one seen preying on a Mangelic flightless streamer duck, which is interesting as well. But they do also show opportunistic feeding behavior, and sometimes will eat small mammals and even the fruits of plants very occasionally, which is interesting as well. In terms of their taxonomy, they are a type of otter. They are they were originally implied to be descended from the Asian small-clawed otter, and its closest relative belongs to the North American river otter. So their closest relative is the neotropical otter, which I believe we'll actually be covering next. So we're not going to get too much into them. So Lontra as a genus is quite an interesting genus. So this includes a lot of the American otters. So the extant species you'll get is the North American river otter, the southern river otter, the neotropical otter, the northern neotropical otter, and the marine otter. So those are the kind of species that you get in that genus. But in terms of threats, sadly, as I mentioned, they are a endangered species. So human activity on coastlines disturbs these marine otters and can be a big thing as well. Humans, including introduce domestic animals that disturb their dens. Humans, as well as a domesticated species, may actually expose marine otters to disease, and they can also die from getting entangled in fishing nets. And marine microplastics have been found in the poos of these otters, and the effect on marine mammals and microplastics is kind of unclear at the moment, but we know we're finding them everywhere, which is really, really worrying. In terms of competition, gulls and South American sea lions compete for them to prey, and they've actually been known to attack the otters. Orcas as well, and sharks also potentially prey on them, but direct attacks have not been observed. And in terms of parasites, they're actually thought to be susceptible to Toxoplasmosis goldii along the northern and central coast of Chile, though they kind of their prevalence in these otter species is lower than other aquatic mustelids, such as other species such as the southern river otter or the American mink. But they also get lots of parasites and stuff as well. But in terms of their conservation status, they are protected under Peruvian, Chilean, and Argentine law. But in the past, they're extensively hunted for both their fur and due to perceived competition, since these guys, a lot of fishermen were thinking, oh my god, they're going to eat our fish. But that's quite, that was a thing as well. And they extirpated them sadly, the hunting extirpated them from most of Argentina and the Falkland Islands. But poaching is still a problem, but one of unknown magnitude. It's actually unknown how many marine otters exist in the wild and what habitat should be preserved to encourage their recovery, but they are considered, endangered. But there's not too much being done about it, but they are protected, so that's kind of a good start. There just needs to be some more concentrated efforts to help their numbers. But yeah, really, really cool animal. So next up, we've got another one of the same genus. We've got the neotropical otter, as we kind of mentioned before. So this is Lutra or Lontra longicaulis, basically the long-tailed otter, you could probably call it. These guys are otter species found in the freshwaters of Mexico and Central America, though throughout mainland South America as well as Trinidad. They're quite similar to the northern and southern river otters, though that occurs directly north and south of their range. These guys are kind of in the middle. So these guys are found in Central America and down into South America, interestingly as well. In terms of their kind of taxonomy and things, they are in the genus Lotra. As I mentioned, they have a very wide range, and they are most similar to the marine and southern river otters, which we'll both be covering soon. Um, and kind of you can see they're mixed together. In terms of their description, the neotropical otter is covered in a short, dark, grayish brown pelt. And its fur color is lighter around the muzzle and throat. They have a long, wide tail with stout, short legs and fully webbed toes. Sexual dimorphism does appear in this species, which males being about a quarter or 25% larger than the females. The head to body length can range between 36 to 66 centimeters, or about 14 to 26 centimeters, and plus you add, a 13 to 84 centimeter long tail, 37 to 84 centimeters, or 15 to 33 inches, with their body mass also ranging between 5 to 15 kilograms, or 11 to 33 pounds. And they'll also communicate with each other using scent marking, also whistles and hums, and all sorts of interesting sounds that these cute little seals, not cute little otters, like to make. So, out of all the Lotra or the American otter species, these guys have the widest range. Um, their habitat ranges from northwest Mexico to central Argentina, and they prefer clear, fast flowing rivers and are really known to settle in sluggish, silt laden lowland waters or boggy areas. While mostly occurring between 300 and 1500 meters above sea level, they can be found settling at about 3000 meters above sea level, which is interesting as well. They require dense riparian vegetation and abundant den sites, but other than that, they are very versatile and tolerant of environmental changes. They prefer den sites that are solid, high and dry, and close to deep water. The neotropical otter is the greatest generalist of all otter species. In addition to rivers and streams they can settle in and exploit some rather formidable habitats, such as wastewater treatment plants, rice paddies, sugarcane plantations, estuaries, deltas, drainage ditches, and sometimes swamps. And they also inhabit the cold glacial lakes and streams of the Andes from Ecuador to Colombia. And they'll also venture to seashores and beaches and maintaining an almost brackish, lifestyle, hunting marine creatures and playing in high saline water. So in terms of their diet, the neotropical otter diet kind of consists mostly of fish and crustaceans, making up about 67 or about 70% and 30% of their diet. Of their total diet is kind of crustaceans and stuff. But they'll also eat occasionally mollusks, small mammals, as well as birds, large insects, and fruits. In areas where fruits and crustaceans are scarce, aquatic insects such as dobsonfly larvae will actually become their main prey. And they're often known to occasionally attack fish nets as a source of prey, hindering fishermen productivity. And otters living near marine habitats have a much higher portion of crustaceans in their diet. Seasonality also affects these choices as well. So during the dry season, they'll actually add a higher portion of fruit since there's less crustaceans and fish available. Though during times, inuran reptiles still make up a very small percentage of their diet. This may also be due to the fact that certain frogs mate during the dry season, so they're easier to find as prey. So in terms of their reproduction, not too dissimilar from other species, of course. So let's actually, have a look at the cute little baby. I always love to have a look at the cute little baby. Where is he? Gotta be in here somewhere. Unless they're microscopic. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Very small. Anyway, breeding occurs mostly in spring, with gestation lasting about 56 days. And produce a litter of about 1 to 5 pups. The pups are born blind yet fully furred. They will emerge from their mother's nest at about 52 days old and begin swimming at 74 days old. They are raised completely by their mother, as males do not provide any parental care. The male will only spend a single day with the female during breeding season, and the female must keep her pups safe from predation by other neotropical otters. And actually, in one captive breeding situation, cannibalism by the mother has occurred, but it was not been confirmed. In an ecologically healthy area, there's many shelters that can be their dens. However, studies show not all possible shelters are occupied, and not all shelters are equally utilized by these otters. Otters tend to visit different shelters at varying frequencies, from 1 to a few times a day up to many times a day. And one factor influences their preference for a den is the water level, especially during the flood season, as when a den near water level can easily be washed away, and a den may be at water level near the bank or more than 1.5 meters above the water level. There are many other factors, including their preferences for shelter, or influencing their preferences for shelter. They prefer dens near freshwater, with high food availability, and relatively deep and wide water. Though during seasons with low water, they may actually become more clumped and will move to areas where there's deeper water and more fish. And deep, wide pools tend to have the greater diversity of fish, which is a preferential for the otters. And studies show that otters will forego a less preferable but more available den, like a muddy riverbank, to spend time in a preferential den, such as a rocky shore. They'll raise their pups. The females will raise their pups in a den without a male. In some cases, the female might find a den has a space to keep her pups and a separate space for her own. A study at a male's otter's movements of 35 days suggests they use 3 different dens without communication between them. The individual moved between 2 islands separated by a 1 kilometer wide estuary. They spent some time with heavy mud, poor substrate for a den, so had to move to find more food. And dens may also have more than one opening, and they can easily exit and forage for food while staying safe from predators. There are many classifications of dens these guys may use. A cavity among stones under tree roots is preferred. And in certain parts of South America, they may actually come across limestone dissolution cavity or a cavity in a rock wall. Though lacking a source of light, they can make great use of these sturdy homes. And as a last resort, they may often actually expend energy excavating a space among vegetation or in riverbanks. Though these homes tend to be less sturdy, and vegetation cover is also quite important for these otters as well. In comparison to other otter dens, they do not have holes directly in the water, nor do they use plant material for their bedding, and will live in caves without light. And they are elusive creatures and prefer undisturbed forests without any sign of human activity. And when humans clear forests for agricultural land, the number of these neotropical otters tends to plummet. So these guys are doing okay. They are considered near threatened, same threats as probably most of the otters. Like other species of otters, they tend to communicate through smell with scratching or by feces. They'll also scent mark using their anal glands, and they'll often only mark their den, certain areas of the den, and separate them from the activity center of their dens. And in caves, when a water source leaks through the walls, they may actually mark the area inside their den to kind of be like, hey, this area is leaking. But in terms of competition, they do range and share a lot of habitat with the giant otter, and both species are mainly piscivorous and diurnal, so they tend to separate in areas, so they are less generalist in habitat. So the giant otter tends to prefer slow-moving water and with overhanging vegetation, but where the neotropical otter may also occur. The giant otter is much larger than these otters and also hunts in groups, so they can take quite large prey. And some areas, like the Pantanal, have high enough biodiversity and productivity, such that both species can live together with little competition. Additionally, these guys often prefer deeper and wider streams than the larger giant otters. But in terms of their conservation, they are often listed as near threatened by the IUCN, with their population currently protected in most countries, but like other species of otter, suffered heavily from fur trade in the 1950s to the 1970s, where they were hunted in lots of areas. They had local extinctions. But illegal hunting, habitat destruction through mining and ranching, and water pollution still affects these populations. And there has been efforts to try and breed them in captivity, but they've seemed to be not that successful. But there are many negative feelings to these guys because they compete with fishermen for fish. But more data needs to be determined to suggest how that overlaps in the exact relationship with that. But the highest competition between these otters and fishermen is typically during droughts, and they actually move out of their regular fishing areas into deeper pools, where they tend to congregate with these otters, and they have issues there. Because the fishermen's facts align with scientific knowledge, scientists can actually trust, the accounts of these eels, not the eels, the otters, and kind of notice, facts about them and use them to actually track them and how they share space together. And they will report that the otters will damage their fishing gear, but do not damage the crab and shrimp nets. And they have varying opinions on their presence, with some wanting to kill them, with some saying they just have to share space. And there has been proposals to subsidize their fish profits lost to otters. However, it might be more beneficial to pay them to collect data on the species as well, which would benefit the fishermen economically, as they're getting paid, to collect data and learn about these otters. And they still get their fish as well. And because there's not much known about them compared to a lot of other things. And otters really get caught in gill nets and die, but they mainly have threats such as habitat degradation that includes agriculture, soil compaction, which makes it harder to dig burrows, roadways and runoff from farms, which gets in the water and causes, the nitrates in the water go up to cause algae, and that can cause the death of lots of different fish. But yeah, there have been some deaths in captivity. There was a pair found in Colombia and taken to Santa Fe Zoological Park to try and breed them. They were observed mating and then separating, and they had given birth. One was successful. The other infant may have unintentionally been killed by the mother, and one idea suggested the mother's enclosure too small and she had no access to water, as she would have in the wild. The mother's gestation was about 86 days, and the two separate breeding events recorded in the zoo. The 86-day gestation was actually much longer than previously anticipated, as on average these guys gestate for about 60 days. Two possible explanations may have been different subspecies or a later copulation may have occurred and not been observed. Or this otter might display short-term variation in its gestational periods as well. So that's quite interesting about them. But yeah, near threatened by pretty much the same things that other species of otter and most species in South America, like habitat destruction and hunting, because all the chopping down in the Amazon and things like that. So these guys are found in the Amazon. But yeah, really, really awesome. So last but certainly not least in terms of our otters, we've got the southern river otter, not to be confused with the neotropical otter. This is a different species. So here's the southern otter, and his eyes bulging out, which is a bit weird. Let's see if we'll have a look at you. Very, very cute. So we've got here the southern river otter, which is another endangered species. So the southern river otter, or Lotra provocarex, or the South American river otter, is an otter that lives in much of Patagonia, so it's a much more southern species and is considered endangered. So this is a medium-sized species. The southern river otter can grow up to about 70 centimeters in length, or about 28 inches, with the tail adding about 40 centimeters to it. Body weight will average about 5 to 10 kilograms, or 11 to 22 pounds, with its fur being dark brown and the upper parts, and a lighter cinnamon color and almost white can be on the underside. In terms of behavior, family groups used to consist only of female of a young, as males are usually solitary, except for the breeding season. Litter sizes, what are you doing? You're having a decent fight there. Okay. That was a pretty decent fight there. Anyway, we'll carry on. Litter sizes average 1 to 2 pups, but up to 4 pups have been recorded being born. They are piscivorous, and their diet naturally includes fish, crustaceans, mollusks, and occasionally they will eat birds and their eggs, particularly of ground nesting birds that can live near water. Occasional reptiles and amphibians may be taken, that includes frogs, smaller turtles, lizards, and sometimes even snakes. But in terms of the habitat, they can be found in marine, freshwater, and terrestrial habitats, but are mostly found in freshwater lakes and rivers, but that have a significant amount of dense vegetation along its shorelines, as they must be present to use as cover. And they're fighting again. I might actually just quickly turn the fighting off, because it is getting a bit annoying. Let's look at a female. So these habitats need to have root systems of mature trees, as well as fallen trees, to make their dens. Although they're referred to as river otters, the southern river otter is actually equally adapted to venturing into more brackish or potentially even fully marine habitats to forage and hunt. And this trait is actually similar to the marine otter, which we covered not too long ago, which is a fully marine otter. In terms of threats, the southern river otter was sadly, like other species of otter, was hunted for their pelts over the last 100 years, and this is kind of the main reason for their current low population and conservation status. And since then, they've not been able to recover due to a number of other threats, but at this point, only 7 known populations are found across Chile and Argentina, and all these populations are isolated from each other. The typical forests and rivers that these guys are mostly found in have been disturbed by human presence, by things such as dam and river construction, as well as stream canalization, and the drainage for agriculture destroys many acres of what could have been habitat for the species. Though Argentina began passing legislation in 1960 to outlaw their hunting still does occur due to a lack of enforcement, and hunting is legal and does still occur in Chile, which is a bit sad. The continual decrease in prey numbers may also cause their populations, as several invasive species have been introduced and are limiting the number of mollusks and fish available as prey, and these cause the otters to move into other freshwater systems to hunt for food. But in terms of conservation, several surveys and studies have been performed to understand their population and the declining in an effort to save the species from extinction. Several are known to live in within national forests, and as I mentioned, they have been banned in Argentina to hunt them. One survey was actually undertaken to see if any live in the Argentine parks, Lanin, Pueblo, and Los Aceros National Park. And the survey spoke with local residents, and they were also looking for signs with the American mink, which is a non-native mustelid that has been introduced to South America because of the fur trade. And kind of that also is a bad thing because they compete with these otters. The mink were introduced and or escaped and have been in the area for many years and are thought to directly compete with these otters for resources and habitat due to their similar lifestyle and prey. The results found signs of the river otter just in 32 of the 275 areas that they surveyed. So they seem to be around, but not very common. And in 2022, they actually reported for the first time in Fork Lake since inquiries began in 1980s. So that seems good as well. But the future kind of directions of conserving the species include obtaining better information about their numbers and locations, and that means they can enforce better laws and protect their habitats there. Also, captive breeding programs will be useful, but there hasn't been any efforts yet. And one cool thing, they actually their name is in kind of Mapuche culture is the Hunul, which is associated with sexual prowess. So, which is quite interesting as well. Very interesting name for an otter, with his eyes bulging out like, oh, what did you say? But yeah, really, really cool. And we've got to have a look at the cute little baby. Look at the cute little baby. That's a very cute little baby. We've got to cover the cute little baby. Anyway, so that is the otter pack done. So these were all done by Sky Polaris, who actually did quite a good job. I loved being able to talk about these otter species. But last and certainly not least, we've got a big extinct mammal from South America as well. So this pretty much most of this episode took place in South America, except for the Asian and African otters at the beginning. Here we have got the Toxodon. So this is Toxodon. I believe what's the sign? This is the nominate subspecies. So this would be there's a lot of different species. This is Platanensis. So this is Toxodon platanensis. So Toxodon. We'll have a look at this nice big male here, which also means bow tooth, which is in reference to the curvature of their teeth. These guys are an extinct genus of large ungulate native to South America and lived from the Pliocene into the late Pleistocene. So very, very interesting. In terms of their taxonomy, they have a very interesting history. So Charles Darwin, who invented or kind of formalized the theory of evolution, or the fact of evolution, we'll probably say. Actually, he was in South America on the HMS Beagle, was one of the first to collect the fossils of Toxodon. In September, October 1832 and October 1833, he collected several isolated teeth from northern Argentina. And on November 26th, he paid 18 pence for a skull that was found by a farmer in Uruguay. And in his book covering the expedition, The Voyage of the Beagle, he kind of covered it, and he was talking about Toxodon and was learning about it. And since Darwin discovered fossils of similar mammals in South America were different from those in Europe, he invoked many debates about evolution and the natural selection of animals. So he kind of was discovering pretty much the theory of evolution. Because, there is the strangest animals, these not related to, they're aligned with Pachyderma. But they were clearly different in a lot of ways. And he compared them a lot to manatees. And they were originally in Pachyderma, but Pachyderma is not a real group anymore because it was just lots of big animals that looked similar, but it turns out there a lot of them are not related, as rhinos are their own thing, and hippos are their own thing, and elephants are their own thing. But yeah, in terms of its evolution itself, what Toxodon is a notoungulate. So these guys belong to a really cool group that are sadly only went extinct a few thousand years ago. So notoungulates were a group of South American native ungulates that had lived in South America for the past 60 million years. So they're only found in South America and nowhere else because South America was an island at the time. And they had evolved in isolation there, taking all the niches of, what ungulates kind of took around the rest of the world. So some were like deer, some were like rhinos, some were like rabbits. So there was they took a lot of different ecologies. And the only time they really got to North America was part of the Great American Biotic Interchange, which happened about 2.5 million years ago. So they were separated for nearly 60 million years from the rest of the world. And they were actually considered quite diverse. There was believed to be about 150 described genera and 13 different families. And I mentioned they are quite diverse. There were some forms like Toxodon that were quite large and rhino-like. Some were rabbit-like. So they were quite diverse. Analysis in collagen, actually looking at Toxodon as well as species like Macrokenia, which is another species of South American ungulate, suggests that they may have been related to Perissodactyls, which contains equids, rhinos, and tapirs. But this is kind of, we don't really know. But it would have been a really deep split from Perissodactyls about 66 million years ago. So basically, at the end of dinosaurs, they would have become their own thing from the rest of the Perissodactyls, which is interesting. So they are technically true ungulates, but they're their own complete kind of group of their own, which is very interesting. Since you're being more entertaining, we'll have a look at you. So Toxodon belongs in the group Toxodontidae, which is a large group of notoungulates which first appeared in late Oligocene, so about 28 to 23 million years ago, and then went diversified quite a bit into the Miocene, and that's when they became the most diverse. And then during the Pliocene onwards, they began to decline. It was climate change, but also competition from other animals and predators from North America. So they kind of diversified a bit. And by the late Pleistocene, there was only a few different species left, including Toxodon. I've already covered Mexotoxodon, which is a slightly larger relative that managed to live in North America. And some other species, but they did decline near the end. In terms of species, there had been lots of different species described. Some of them have been split into other species, some have been lumped and stuff, but the main one that's still kind of the type subspecies here is Platanensis, but there's a lot of other species. There just needs to be a lot more taxonomy to kind of clear them up. So Toxodon, as I mentioned, was quite large. We'll have a look at you sleeping again because you're quite cute. They are quite large. They've been compared in their ecology to hippos and rhinos, and they are one of the largest known notoungulates and one of the largest toxodontids. The really only comparison is Mixotoxodon, which might have been slightly bigger, but that is known from less complete remains, so it could be about the same. But these guys reach between 1 to 2 tons at about 2,200, 2,600 pounds. And then weighed about body length of about 2.7 meters or about 8'10", so quite large. They had quite a large skull as well, and their skull was triangular in shape. All their teeth were quite high crowned, and like other toxodonts, they had upper and lower first incisors that were quite large, and were seen to have been modified into ever-growing tusks. And the upper incisors also display an arcuate shape. And they had an ever-growing hypsodont cheek tooth as well, which the name Toxodont comes from. And ever-growing teeth are unknown in any living ungulate. So these were the only ungulate to have ever-growing teeth. But there are mammal groups such as wombats and rodents that have ever-growing teeth. And the surface of the cheek is primarily dentine. They also had elongated neural spines, which would have supported muscles to support the large head. And the legs of Toxodon were relatively short and robust. And the hind limbs were considerably longer than the forelimbs, resulting in a back that was kind of elevated a little bit, as you kind of see going on there. The ungulates, the ulna, had a strongly backward projecting umbilicum, similar to that of rhinos, so they would have had their front leg was held extended while standing, like a rhino. So yeah, that's quite cool. And they had 3 functional digits, which were tipped with hoof-like phalanges, so, similar to a rhino in that regard, Perissodactyl otod ungulate, so the 3 toes, like a rhino. In terms of their distribution, they were quite widely ranging. They were found from South America east of the Andes into northern Argentina, Bolivia, and up into the Peru-Brazilian border in northeastern Brazil. And although some authors suggest that the distribution of Toxodon extended to Venezuela, others also suggest that the related Mixotoxodon was the only toxodontid present, which also found in the southern United States, as I kind of mentioned when I talked about that. That would have been a few parts ago. They ranged up there and became were the only ones there at the end of the Pleistocene. In terms of their habitat, there were some suggestions that these guys would have been semi-aquatic, based on their similar anatomy to hippopotamuses, and this has been disputed by other authors and things, and analyzing their oxygen isotopes, which is a great way to tell, and between, because the oxygen isotopes do differ between aquatic and terrestrial animals. Just they were a terrestrial animal, and their ecology was most similar to a rhinoceros. and they were suggested to actually move quite considerable speeds, and they were thought to be quite ecologically plastic and have a wide range or a wide niche range, and would have adapted to local conditions. With some areas they were almost completely browsers, and some areas they were almost completely grazers. So they were quite generalist in their habitats, like Indian and rhinos, stuff like that. So quite generalist, potentially, being a great mixed feeder. And although Toxodon may have lived in open steppe and savannas, some areas they may have inhabited woodlands. So, as I mentioned, they would have been quite generalist, done a little bit of everything. Like other large animals, living animals of the same sort of size, they were thought to have been potentially just giving birth to one baby at a time. And we actually do have evidence of their bones having signs of disease, like osteomyelitis and pathologies, which is kind of interesting. They also have enable hypoplasia, or the loss of tooth enamel, which likely because is their ever-growing nature and environmental stresses as well. And it's also thought they would have been preyed upon by the large saber-toothed cat Smilodon poplita, which was the apex predator of South America during the Pleistocene. And in terms of its extinction, I've already there's talked about a lot about the Pleistocene extinction with the extinction of the giant megafauna. So that's a big debate that we've talked about. It's being debated. There are some mid-Holocene dates for Toxodon, suggesting they may have lasted a little bit longer, but that suggests to be contamination, so most likely they would have went extinct about 12,000 years ago with the rest of the megafauna. With these megafauna extinctions following the arrival of humans in South America, and there has been some sites suggesting the Toxodons may have been butchered or killed by people. There has been some small evidence of that. But there's no evidence really that they killed them, but likely they would have, 2 and 2. There's some that have been associated with spears, so that's evidence they could have killed them. But yeah, it's the same thing that could have killed most of the megafauna. It's either people, climate, or disease, or some variation of those. Some are just asteroids, but really I think it's just a combination of all those factors. Populations being stressed, and then people come in and slowly dwindle down their populations. And being such large, slow-breeding animals, it's hard to, replace your population quick. So it only takes, taking a few a year to really hurt their populations because they're such large, slow-breeding animals. But yeah, I think that covers about right. But yeah, that's a monsoon mod. Did a really, really great job with that monsoon. Love to see you doing extinct animals, and I think you did a really awesome job with this one. So yeah, I'm gonna head off and carry on. So yeah, I want to thank everyone for doing a good job with this. I'm going to thank Jake Aquatics for that little flag tail he made. Thank you, Sky Polaris, for all those otter species. It was utterly amazing. I've got to say it again. And be able to talk about lots of different otter species. I thought that was quite cool. And then also we've got Monsoon, who made this Toxodon, another great extinct species. So I'm quite excited to have that here and be able to talk about the species, because Toxodon's quite cool. And kind of sad we didn't get the prehistoric park variant I was joking about, but I think this one looks perfectly fine as it is. Probably actually more realistic. The prehistoric park one's more nostalgic than anything. But yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like and subscribe, always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified below anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, if you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.